Assalamu alaikum guys, welcome back. Let's get into it.
Anna Gasparin, your view of, well, the combined attacks, Israel and United States?
Well, I think Israel has been pushing for regime change in Iran. The claims that Iran was close to developing a nuclear weapon was false. Not only were they over a year away, according to Netanyahu himself, in being able to develop a nuclear weapon, they didn't even have a mechanism in order to deliver said nuclear weapon. This has been all about engaging in a regime change war. That's what this is. Anyone who's pretending like this is about nuclear weapons is lying to you. Again, the United States is forced to fight another war on behalf of Israel. And I just want to ask Henriquez a question real quick, because I'm seeing a lot of videos of Israelis leaving Israel to go home to the United States or to Greece or to other European countries. You guys got what you wanted. You guys got your war. Are you expecting American troops to fight this war and die on your behalf? Or are you going to bring the Israelis back, tell them to put their fatigues on and get ready for a ground invasion? Because if they want regime change, they're going to need a ground invasion, and Americans shouldn't be forced to do it.
I will let Jonathan Conricus respond. All I would say, in relation to your super confidence that Iran was not planning to weaponize its enriched uranium, what else could they possibly have been planning?
Well, I mean, they were not enriching uranium under the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, which unfortunately Trump took the pressure from Netanyahu to pull out of in 2018, which essentially cleared the way for Iran to enrich uranium. Now, yes, they enriched up to 60%. You need 90% in order to have the material necessary to build a nuclear weapon. However, I think what Iran was doing, considering the fact that they're in a region of thugs in Israel who clearly have been announcing that they want regime change in Iran, they wanted a deterrent. I think that's what they were doing. And as this war in Gaza, this genocide in Gaza continues, I think they wanted some form of a deterrent, much like Israel has with their over 90 nuclear weapons that they don't acknowledge, of course. They're not part of the non-proliferation treaty, even though Iran was. Just really interesting comparisons there.
Isn't it crazy how quickly Israel can come to an agreement for a ceasefire with a country that can actually fight back? But when it's innocent women and children and civilians, it's not possible. It's not possible. It's not a war in Gaza. It's not. It's an extermination. They're exterminating. Israelis will blatantly say to your face that they don't believe that these people are people and that they exist. Are you kidding me right now? And we're siding with Israel? This is not a war. It's an extermination. And no one cares. Because what? Because of what? Genuinely because of what? You can't hide behind anti-Semitism when you're committing genocide. That's not what this is. This is anti-genocide. And it's just crazy to me that we're still not talking about it. And also, we're not talking about the congresswoman that was assassinated for being a Democrat just 2 weeks ago. Does everything feel great yet? Is everything feeling awesome? Is our country on the right track? This is the track you wanted? Because it's certainly the one that he sold us and that he was telling you he was going to take us on. Like, how do you sleep at night, genuinely, if you support Israel? Genuinely, like, how do you sleep at night?
I agree with her. You can't call it a war when one side has an army and one doesn't. Okay, there might be malicious or whatever, but it's not an army. You're killing innocent civilians. You can't call that a war, unless you think everyone is Hamas, which they do say anyway,
Hundreds have gathered here in central London in a defiant show of support for Palestine Action, the group that the government is trying to prescribe as a terrorist organisation.
Told you numerous times to get back.
Now, this protest started peacefully, but as you can see, some members who were protesting have now been detained by police. This demonstration was originally planned for outside Parliament, but at the last minute was banned by police and forced to relocate here. The government's actions follows last week's break-in at an Air Force base where activists painted military planes with red paint in protest at the UK's continued supply of weapons parts to Israel. Now, there were no injuries reported, but millions worth of damages.
This is a really troubling move for anyone who cares about freedom of speech, for the right to protest in this country. We're seeing an evaporation of our rights as we speak.
Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has drafted the prescription under the Terrorism Act, and that would put Palestine Action on the same group as Hamas and Al-Qaeda on UK's banned list, making support, membership, or even public endorsement punishable by up to 14 years in prison.
The majority of people all over the world and in this country are for peace, and there's only so many ways to do that, and this is one of the only ones that's still available to me.
This protester staging a peaceful sit-in was later handcuffed and removed. Protesters here say they're not just here to protest against actions in Gaza, but also...
I just want to pause it again and say that, I'm not surprised. I knew sooner or later they were cracking down on the Palestinian protesters. They're already doing it in America, UK, I think they're doing it in France as well now. In Europe, when they say it's democracy, there's no democracy,
a potential erosion.
The Zionists were so humiliated that Israeli media is now even coming out and admitting the major failures. Take a listen, and I quote, "While Israel could have continued the war offensively, its defensive capabilities were running dry. There was no way out." I'll add that another one said, "We cannot say that this war was a full victory for Israel, but many goals were achieved." What? Regime change? No, you failed. Wiping out Iran's nuclear program? No, you failed. Trying to show how great your Iron Dome is? No, you failed. You failed at everything. This was a total, utter failure for the Zionists. Of course, this war ends with a technical stalemate, but a technical stalemate that obviously is an Iranian victory because there were no major goals of Israel that were actually achieved, okay? I'll read one more here for you, and this is from British-funded BBC Persian, who said, "In reality, Iran is the victor in this war. Israel failed to complete their main goals, overthrowing the Islamic Republic and eliminating Iran's nuclear program. And they experienced destruction unprecedented in Israel's entire history." Okay, there you go. Keep it simple. Israel failed.
A new government review warns the UK must actively prepare for potential war in the homeland. The National Security Strategy says it's the first time in many years that conflict on home soil has to be considered. The report points to Russia and Iran as potential threats.
Apparently, Trump is furious with Israel. That's great news. Why? Because all the...
I wonder why they're preparing for war. Maybe they're doing something that they shouldn't. UK government, they're doing something that they shouldn't. Obviously, they're supporting genocide. They've been complicit in that. I wouldn't be surprised,
Ceasefires fall apart because Israel never listens to them. So what happened here was Trump declared a ceasefire. He claimed that Iran and Israel were in favor of it, and he said, look, they're going to do one more bombing run that they already had in process. Iran had one and Israel had one. And then Israel says, okay, great, we're going to do 8 more on top of that. And Trump's like, what do you mean? I told you there was a ceasefire. They're like, yeah, but we're above the law. We're Israel. We can do as many. The ceasefire is just for the other side. We're going to do 8 more bombing runs. And apparently Trump got furious about that. And he's like, no, I said ceasefire. I meant ceasefire. There's a MAGA reporter saying that he ripped Netanyahu a new a-hole in a conversation that they had. That's really important because if you don't hold Israel accountable, then the ceasefires don't mean anything and you'll never get to peace. You have to put pressure on Israel, the biggest violator of the ceasefires. So that's good news and good progress towards an actual ceasefire.
When the leader of Iran says death to America, why doesn't that concern you?
Okay, that's a chant. And by the way, I want to be very clear. Why are they chanting death to America? Why are they chanting that? That's kind of a random thing. Like, I know,
because they want Americans dead.
But why do they want, why are they specifically chanting as opposed to saying, I don't know, death to China or death to Russia? What is it specifically about America?
Well, they say death to America, death to Israel, death to the United Kingdom, actually.
Oh, okay.
Death to pretty much anyone that wants to stand up to them.
Could have had something to do with our actions in the Middle East is why I'm saying that we need a change in foreign policy. It maybe has something to do with just like killing 1 million Iraqi civilians, okay, because Bibi Netanyahu got on a congressional stage and said there are weapons of mass destruction, and we took that to the bank and there actually were no weapons of mass destruction, so we just killed a million. It could have something, I could be crazy. It could have something to do with our actions in the Middle East. The fact that we have 2,000 troops stationed in Syria right now under the guise of saying that we're fighting ISIS, while at the same time we know that Bibi Netanyahu funded the al-Qaeda adjacent front because he wanted to overthrow Syria. And they, again, expand their borders, immediately take on territory and sell us absolute nonsense. We're talking about funding Hamas. Bibi Netanyahu funded Hamas. There is footage of Bibi Netanyahu saying this stuff on camera. So it's just so ridiculous to me to pretend that they're in some predicament, that they may be eradicated soon, which is why they have to keep funding all of these terrorist groups and then pretending that they're victims of terror, when in fact they are the people that are imparting it worldwide. You know, I just think that, like I said, Generation 9/11 has grown up, and I think that our eyes are very clear here, and we recognize that our relationship with Israel has become increasingly problematic, and it always was problematic. So I'll again ask the questions, Piers. I'm asking you because we're having a conversation. Yeah. Name something positive that our Zionist AIPAC foreign policy has brought to America.
Well, I think the positive side of, if you want an answer about that, is that America has been Israel's steadfast ally because it recognizes as a country that Israel has been under an almost unique, multifaceted threat on its border for a very long time from people that want to destroy it. And, you know, that you may not see that as a benefit, but Israel has been very supportive to the United States in many ways. Right. So why shouldn't America?
I just want something concrete that has been benefit. Like, we got better in America in this way. Just name something. Gas prices, just something that the average American can relate to.
Well, you're not going to have a correlation between Zionism and gas prices in America. Of course, you're not.
No, I'm just
obviously
giving you an example. Just tell me one thing that
tangible benefits.
Because what your argument here is like, well, you get a pat on the back and you can say that you helped this country, which was formed in 1948 by pretending to be refugees, if you will, and being invited into the homes of Palestinians, the horrific story
of what happened. Well, they weren't pretending to be refugees. They were people fleeing a Holocaust.
Let's be clear. Let me finish my statement.
What do you mean pretending to be refugees?
Let me finish my statement. When I say pretending to be refugees and being invited into the home, you would think that these people were helpless and were going to be grateful to the people that hosted them. People like Muhammad Hadid, Bella Hadid and Gigi Hadid's father, who was an infant at this time in his mother's arms. She had just given birth. They had invited these refugees because of the goodness of their heart. And then one day they return home and their doors are locked and they are told that if you try to enter, you are going to be shot and killed. That is the reality of how Israel was established as a state. Okay, that is not a stain that you can wipe from history. Most Americans growing up actually believe what happened was that, okay, it was a little messy. That's what happens after wars. Borders get changed. But at the very least, they were given money. I mean, you've lived here for hundreds of years. Here's money for your property. No, that's not what happened. They were forced out of their homes at gunpoint.
Listen.
And it's wrong. So we get to be the nation pat on the back. According to you, the thing that America gets. Let me finish. I'm going to let you finish. It's your show. We can. But let me finish. Your argument is that what we get to be is that nation that keeps supporting it as they continue to move their borders in this way. Now we're seeing that incursion into Gaza, and we are certainly going to see it by the end of this administration in the West Bank. Because, like I said, that is why Miriam Adelson gave Trump $100 million.
Look, as you know, I oppose what the Israeli government is doing now in Gaza. I oppose the expansion of settlements on the West Bank. I think all of that is completely wrong. I do think America supports Israel because it remains the only democracy in the Middle East, and that's an important...
They're not a democracy. Stop saying that, Piers. You know better.
Well, they have elections.
It's not a democracy.
They have elections.
But who gets to vote in those elections? Do the Gazans get to vote in that election?
Well, the Israelis get to vote in Israel, obviously.
Okay, so you're basically saying America had a democracy, when we had
Israel
laws that said Black Americans couldn't, Black Americans
Israel
couldn't
moved
vote.
out. It is indisputable that Israel moved out of Gaza in 2005, and there was an election, and Hamas got elected. Right now,
yeah,
I agree.
That's because
I agree with you. I agree with.
But Bibi Netanyahu was on camera saying that they were going to fund Hamas into power. So they orchestrated that because they wanted to create the solution.
I agree with you that Netanyahu wanted to cause a split between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. It was divide and rule. It was a catastrophically bad strategy, and it led to what happened on October the 7th over a 20-year period. There's no doubt it was a terrible thing that Netanyahu did, one of the many reasons I think he should go. But there was no doubt that the Israelis pulled out of Gaza and allowed them to have elections, and they elected Hamas, and the rest has been disastrous history.
Because the Israelis funded, because Bibi Netanyahu, they funded Hamas.
I don't disagree with you, but they still had elections.
So it's like we rigged an election, but look what the election results show is that they wanted to put Hamas into power. And so when we talk about who is funding these terrorists, the answer is Bibi Netanyahu. And I don't want to get into his corruption trials, but every single person watching this right now should go pursue the documentary, The Bibi Files, because it is absolutely stunning to understand.
I believe one of the reasons
this man is.
That's it for today, guys. If you're new to the channel, please like, share, and subscribe. Assalamu alaikum.